Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and we're in Volume 1, Chapter 22. Chapter 22 is titled Mental Health, a Modern Day Delusion. This is where you start learning about some of the misunderstandings that we have in modern psychology about things like anorexia, bulimia, ADHD, ADD, whether it's bipolar, schizophrenia, or any of these other things that people are really struggling with. There's actually solutions to this within the teachings of the Buddha through training the mind. But oftentimes people are thinking about it as brain chemistry or a brain defect is the actual problem. And as long as an individual thinks that way, they're never going to actually be able to solve the problem, but they'll just continue to stay medicated for the rest of their life. So in this particular chapter, I help students to understand that there's a solution for these challenges and struggles that they're experiencing, and it's through training of the mind. So I'm going to help you guys to understand that after we do our meditation, because we start each class with a meditation. So I'll start you guys out with that, and then afterwards we'll move into this talk about mental health and how this can be improved through training of the mind in the teachings of the Buddha. If you would like to join for the meditation, I'm going to start with some chanting to ease us into the meditation. Then I'm going to come in with some guidance to guide you in the meditation for a period of time. Then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet and we're all meditating together. Then I'm going to come back in with the chanting to ease us out of the meditation. And then that's where I'll start today's class. So if you'd like to join for meditation, maybe you'll pull up a meditation cushion or a chair or anything that you'd like in order to make the body comfortable so that you can actually train the mind. And you're welcome to chant along as I'm chanting if you'd like. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanhang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma สติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโพโตภาควาติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect. Just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thoughts, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมะขวาพุทธังมะขวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาขวัตตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาขวัตโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. Welcome to anyone who's joining us on Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom, or even anyone who's listening to this on the replay. Welcome to all of you guys. As I mentioned to you today, I'm going to be sharing a topic with you from chapter 22 of our book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This chapter is titled Mental Health, a Modern Day Delusion. This is where I help bring to a student's attention that some of the things that you might have been exposed to in terms of modern psychology, these things may not actually be representing 100% of the truth about what's really truly going on. If you or people that you know are challenged with things like depression or bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, anorexia, bulimia, PTSD, ADHD, ADD, these are all things that can actually be resolved through training the mind. Not only these, but others as well. That right now there's a lot of people in the world that are thinking that these things are caused by brain chemistry or a defect in the actual brain. And as long as somebody walks around thinking that way, they'll never actually be able to solve the underlying issues that are causing the symptoms. So while the mental anguish and the challenges that people are experiencing related to mental health is a real life thing, that people are really challenged with these things, the reason why these things are occurring isn't necessarily understood. And this is the modern day delusion, that the mind is just not understanding what it's not understanding. And there's a lot of people thinking that they have a defective brain, when if they started to actually train their mind and understand what was underlying the symptoms of these things that they're experiencing, they could actually resolve this 100% and not necessarily be relegated to medicine for the rest of their life, because that's very expensive and very costly to be associated with with having to take medicine, not to mention the side effects and things like this. So what I usually do when I share with you the information from this chapter is I first talk with you and make sure that I've refreshed your memory about the underlying beginning, most basic teachings of the Buddha, which is the three universal truths and the four noble truths. Now, in a recent class, I took a poll to see how many people understood the three universal truths and four noble truths and felt like they might need a refresher on that. And nobody felt like they needed a refresher on that. So I'm going to assume that that's where you guys are as well, that the same people, by and large, that were attending then are kind of in attendance now. So you probably don't need me to go through in a very thorough way, the way that I typically go through the three universal truths and the four noble truths. But it's important that you keep these in mind because this is the basis of me helping you to be able to understand why an individual is misunderstanding things like ADHD, ADD, anorexia, bulimia, PTSD, and things like this. That it's important to keep in mind that the Buddha taught the universal truth of impermanence, of things constantly changing, that he explained these conditioned feelings in the mind as being discontent, discontented, or discontentedness, where the mind in the unenlightened state is forming its inner feelings on some condition, that the mind's going to experience either pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant. And this is some condition, that the mind is basing its inner feelings on something. And then I taught the universal truth of non-self, helping people to understand that you're not this body, you're not this mind, this isn't who you are as a person. And then I help people to understand what is craving, desire, attachment, wants, and expectations, where the mind is longing and yearning with a strong eagerness, pulling in the directions of the objects of its affection, wanting things to be a certain way. This is the mind having like an unquenchable thirst, thinking that the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. And because of that, the mind experiences this up and down and up and down and up and down, that this is the actual cause of the problem. Because when you get into the Four Noble Truths, you understand that the problem in the unenlightened mind is discontentedness, that those conditioned feelings are the problem that an individual is experiencing because the mind experiences this up and down and up and down and up and down. That's the problem that each unenlightened being is experiencing. The cause of that problem is craving, desire, attachment. You can see that in the second noble truth, that there's the cause of this discontentedness is that the mind is craving permanence while it lives in an impermanent world. And you can see this to be the truth because all these teachings of the Buddha, you're not believing them. You're actually able to independently verify and see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. Oftentimes in the unenlightened state with the lack of wisdom, we blame the feelings that are being experienced on other people. And then that individual might push people away. They might be bitter, harsh, and hostile, or they might put their expectations on people. So it's important that you understand the cause of all these discontent feelings in the mind is the longing, yearning within the mind itself. Then there's the elimination of these discontent feelings is possible by eliminating craving, desire, attachment. That if you eliminate the cause, then you will eliminate the actual feeling. So that's why it's so important to understand what the cause of these discontent feelings are so that you can eliminate that cause so that you can eliminate the actual conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. So you can get to the peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy that is enlightenment, where it's a permanent mental state that you're experiencing at all times. And then in the fourth noble truth, the Buddha is explaining that the way to eliminate discontentedness, essentially the way to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, is the Eightfold Path. This is the complete perfect plan that an individual is learning in order to be able to transform the mind. And it starts with right view, where the right view is to understand that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. If you have wrong view, you will blame other people for what you're actually experiencing within your own mind. And this isn't going to lead to progress and improvement on the path to enlightenment, because if it's everyone else that's causing these feelings for you, then there's nothing you can do to fix it. So why would anybody ever try to train their mind if they truly thought that other people were causing them to be discontent? So you can establish right view by understanding that it's your own mind's craving, desire, attachment that's causing these discontent feelings. And then you can implement all the other factors of the path, and gradually over time, the mind will gradually move towards this enlightened mental state. through cultivation of wisdom, through improving your moral conduct, and improving your mental discipline and control of the mind. So let me just pause and see if you guys have any questions before I go into talking about mental health specifically. If you have a question about anything I just kind of refreshed maybe your memory about, or maybe this is the first time you've heard it and you have some questions, feel free to put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom and I'll be pleased to answer any questions that you guys have. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So now let's talk about mental health, because if you understand that the cause of things like sadness and anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all these are coming from the same underlying cause, which is the craving, desire, attachment, the craving for permanence. If the mind gets what it wants, it gets happy or excited. But if it doesn't get what it wants, it gets those painful feelings like anger, frustration, sadness, and others. Well, in the modern mental health practices, oftentimes people are tweaking brain chemistry in order to solve something that they consider to be a medical issue, like sadness or labeled as depression. So in order to understand this misunderstanding that is occurring in the modern mental health field, it's important to understand that the brain and the mind are two different things, that they're not the same thing. The brain is the physical organ. That's actually tangible. It's something you can point to. It's something that you can touch. But the mind is non-physical. It's not tangible. It can't be physically touched because it doesn't exist in just one place necessarily. It's non-physical. It can't be actually touched. So while the physical organ of the brain is something that we understand, this mind is something that a lot of people train that actual mind to be able to be purified and get to the point where it's no longer experiencing things like sadness, anger, and frustration. This physical brain and mind being two different things, they do affect each other because they're connected. So if you train the mind, there'll be an effect to the brain. And if you tweak the brain chemistry, there will be an effect to the mind. But you can't clean up the mind through tweaking brain chemistry. It's not possible. So when people are experiencing symptoms such as sadness, stress, anxiety, and others, those conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant, they might see it as a medical issue because that's kind of what's been taught in modern day, and they might seek chemicals in order to tweak their brain chemistry. But there's no amount of chemicals that you can introduce into the brain that's going to clean up the mind, because that craving, desire, attachment, the longing, yearning that is causing all those painful feelings and all the others, it can't be eliminated through tweaking brain chemistry. It's the craving, desire, attachment that the mind is craving permanence, lacking wisdom, that the world is impermanent. So therefore the mind just continues to crave and crave and crave and crave. And no matter how sad you are, no matter how stressed you are, no matter how much anxiety you have, this is coming from craving, desire, attachment. And there's no amount of brain tweaking or chemicals tweaking that is going to actually solve that. The brain chemistry being changed through pharmaceuticals can kind of numb the mind, but it can't actually change it to the point where it's no longer having craving, desire, attachment. That comes through training of the mind. The mind needs to be trained to actually let go of its craving, desire, attachment. But the mind doesn't know how to do this in the unenlightened state, so it holds on and holds on and holds on. It's craving, it's longing, it's yearning, it's wanting things to be a certain way. And there's no amount of tweaking brain chemistry that's going to fix that. So while these modern medical practices for psychology are serving a certain purpose, particularly in an acute situation where somebody's having psychosis or something like that, there's no amount of that is actually going to get the individual to be completely, perfectly peaceful and joyful for the rest of their life. An individual is going to oftentimes struggle through taking medications and various therapies and things like this and trying to get to some stability of the mind and be able to function in the world in a certain way that feels comfortable. So while individuals are continuing to think that the problem is brain chemistry, they're going to keep trying to tweak the brain rather than actually train the mind. Or they might keep seeking other types of things like that, thinking that that's what it's going to take to get to some kind of comfort in their day-to-day life. So I'm going to share with you a few symptoms that people label as mental illness And you might actually relate to some of these things, and I'll help you to be able to see how these things aren't actually coming from the brain chemistry. So if an individual has had childhood trauma, what people refer to as childhood trauma, say they've been sexually abused or physically abused or something like this, and now as an adult, they're having sadness and other discontent feelings. Maybe they're having guilt or shame or fear, things like that are coming up in their mind based on those situations that occurred in the past. Well, this trauma isn't permanent in their mind. This experience that they had however many years ago isn't a permanent thing. But what's happening is in the present moment, the individual is clinging and holding on to that experience that happened in the past, and they're forming feelings today based on something that happened in the past, where what they could do is they could train their mind to let go. And when they train their mind to let go, now in the present moment, they can actually be quite peaceful, where you can remember that you had these experiences and these things occurred, maybe sexual abuse or physical abuse, but you don't have to form feelings about that today, such as sadness or guilt or shame or fear, anything like this. But as long as the mind doesn't know how to let go and it hasn't been trained to let go, it's going to continue to struggle in the present moment because it's forming feelings today based on things that happened in the past. And there's no amount of brain chemistry that you can tweak in order to train the mind to let go of something in the mind. So an individual might have been taught that trauma is permanent and you will never get over this. But this isn't actually true. You can have these situations and just train your mind not to form feelings based on things that happened in the past. And this is where the gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress comes in. Or say somebody's been diagnosed with the symptoms of bipolar disorder. They might be taught that their brain is defective. And typically what this person is experiencing is they'll go into this period of excitement where they'll be excited and elated for a period of time, but then they will kind of crash and go into this sadness and depression for a period of time. This is referred to as mania, when you're really excited. And then when you're sad or other painful feelings might be called depression. Some people call this manic depression, but now they call it bipolar disorder. Well, what is happening here is the mind is having so many cravings that it's craving, and those cravings might be getting fulfilled where maybe they have sexual cravings, or maybe they have craving for more money or a better job or shopping or gambling or something like this. Oftentimes people who are diagnosed with bipolar are headed towards destructive activities like that. And they get really excited in this mania where they're just like, go, 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 go. And then their mind ends up getting to a point where it can't sustain that level of craving anymore. And then it crashes and it goes into this depression or this sadness where the mind is no longer getting its cravings fulfilled. So now it's actually sad. So the mind is conditioned to believe in some cases that there's a chemical imbalance in the brain, and that's the source of the problem. And the solution for this, what people are taught, is the pharmaceutical treatments. And the true source of the problem in this situation is still unknown. So therefore, people are going to be led to believe that their intentions, their speech, their actions are a result of brain chemistry. Sometimes people have adopted the view that their brain is somehow deficient or defective, and therefore their moral conduct can't be improved, or they're functioning in the way that they're functioning because of their brain. And their brain is hindering them from being polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to other beings. They might think that it's their brain chemistry that's causing them to be angry or frustrated or agitated, or any of these other challenges. Or maybe it's their brain chemistry that is causing them to have a lack of concentration or focus, or it's their brain chemistry that is causing them to have eating disorders or PTSD or things of this nature. And as long as an individual thinks this way, that it's the brain that is the problem, then this is what is referred to as wrong view in the teachings of the Buddha, that the individual isn't understanding why their mind is experiencing these difficulties and struggles. And as long as there's wrong view, then the actual solution to fix it can't be applied, that there's only these chemicals that are being used in order to somehow get the person to some level of comfort, but never really fully comfortable 100%. So when an individual understands that the real true cause of their discontent feelings and any kind of harmful intention, speech, or actions is actually their untrained mind, And it's craving, desire, attachment that is causing that. The mind longing, yearning, wanting things to be a certain way. And if the mind gets what it wants, it gets happy and excited. But if it doesn't get what it wants, it gets painful feelings. And then when those painful feelings arise, an individual's intention, speech, and actions might be unskillful. So because of the lack of wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline, the individual is experiencing the difficulties and struggles that are being labeled as mental illness. And when an individual understands that it's just a lack of training of their mind, and through training of the mind, they can purify their mind, eliminating craving, desire, attachment, and they can get to peace and joy, then they can establish right view, where the real problem that they're encountering is within their own mind. And now when they approach it with the solutions and the tools and the techniques that the Buddha is teaching in order to remedy the pollutions of the mind and uproot them out of the mind, having right view, an individual can now employ the actual real solutions to fix it. And that's what the Eightfold Path is there for, is to apply the tools and techniques to remedy the difficulties and challenges that are in the mind. And now you can experience improvement. But as long as an individual keeps thinking it's brain chemistry and that's all they're doing is tweaking brain chemistry, then they'll never actually get to an actual solution. But once you understand right view and you understand what the real problem is the craving, desire, attachment in the untrained mind, and an individual just needs to cultivate wisdom, improve their moral conduct, and improve their mental discipline, now they can experience real results and real improvement. So if the problem is a defective brain, if that's what we are to think based on modern science and what people are sharing with us in the psychology field, then we would observe that all populations across the world would experience these same defects, that these same problems would occur across all populations, that we would see that what's going on in one country would be occurring in another country too, because we're all human beings, we're all interacting with each other, we're all breeding with each other, having babies from different ethnicities and different nationalities. We would see these same brain defects showing up in all parts of the world. But this isn't what we actually see. We see certain areas of the world that is being taught that it's brain defect that is the problem, and there needs to be chemicals that are introduced. There's places like here in Thailand that doesn't have the proliferation of things like ADHD, ADD, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, anorexia, bulimia. You don't see these kinds of things here in this society because they understand how to train the mind, and they've been doing that for many generations. If humanity and the human mind is truly defective, it wouldn't have been able to become that way in just a matter of a few decades, because it's been several decades that in the last maybe 50 years, 100 years, people have resigned themselves to thinking that it's a brain defect that is the problem here that's causing these emotions and these feelings and this unskillful conduct. But the human brain couldn't have become defective that quick in such a short amount of time, because people during the lifetime of the Buddha, they experienced sadness and frustration and guilt and shame and fear and all those kinds of things too. And so did people before that, and so did people after that. But it wasn't ever seen as a medical problem, because people were trying to understand the mind and they were trying to understand how to train the mind, and they ultimately figured that out. If modern mental health practices are actually helping, then what we would see is the number of cases and the number of people diagnosed with mental illnesses slowly declining. Because if a certain group of people have actually found a problem and it's a defective brain, and we can introduce a solution, which is tweaking brain chemistry, and we've actually found the real solution to this, then we would see the number of cases slowly declining because we've actually found a real solution. But that's not what we actually see. We actually see a proliferation of people being diagnosed and a proliferation of medication for people treating things that would otherwise easily be handled through training of the mind. If the modern mental health practices are actually helping in solving a real problem, where we see these mental health practices the most in places like the USA, Australia, the UK, and places like that, then these places would be the most mentally stable and most mentally fit populations in the world, because they discovered a problem, defective brain. We've discovered the solution. Let's introduce some tweaking of the brain through brain chemistry and pharmaceuticals. And now, because we're doing that and it's a real solution that's working, we would see that those populations are the most mentally fit and most mentally stable populations of people in the world. And you'll need to ask yourself, is that what we see? Do we see that in places like the US, the UK, and Australia, that those are the most mentally fit people in the world with the most stability and stableness of the mind and steadiness of the mind? The challenge is that in Western cultures, they don't understand things like the three universal truths, the Four Noble Truths, and the Eightfold Path. They don't have that wisdom in their culture to understand these natural laws and training of the mind. What we've all learned growing up is we learned how to clean the body. This is something that our parents taught us and our other caregivers taught us how to clean this body. And we figured that out by the time we were maybe 10, 12, or 14 years old, how to clean this body. And that wasn't something that was important for us to do. But we weren't necessarily taught how to clean the mind. And because we weren't taught how to clean the mind, we're walking around with this being, this physical body, and now this mind. And yeah, we feel really uncomfortable when we don't clean the body. It feels really uncomfortable when we don't clean the body, and that's why we clean the body practically every day. But when you don't clean the mind, you're going to also feel uncomfortable too. And none of us growing up probably learned how to clean the mind. And therefore, we've felt uncomfortable at different times in our life because our mind is not purified. It hasn't been trained, and we didn't have that wisdom growing up. And we might have grown up in a family that didn't have this wisdom. But now that you're an adult, you can change all of that. And you can choose to learn and grow and develop and actually training the mind. You can practice these teachings and create a well-stable mind, a well-trained mind. And as an individual learns and practices the teachings to create this well-trained mind, the mind will become more and more stable because we're now learning how to address this entire being. That we're not just cleaning the body anymore, we're also cleaning the mind as well. You can gradually eliminate medications, enjoying a complete stable mind and having a stable life where the mind can be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. And this is a permanent mental state. You can get to the point where all your relationships are harmonious. But again, an individual wouldn't know how to do this if they were just thinking that the problems they are experiencing is brain chemistry, because they're not actually cultivating wisdom to train the mind. They're just trying to tweak their brain chemistry. It's almost like plug and play. You know, if I have a certain computer that isn't working, let me take out one computer chip and put in another computer chip, and then it'll work better. But that's not the way a human being works. A human being works in that you need to cultivate wisdom. So if an individual is currently on medications now, if they train their mind and develop this stable mind over a period of time, they could experience that stability of their mind, and with the support of their doctors and maybe their family, they would be able to gradually reduce their medications, and now they have that stable mind. Whereas if they try to get off their medications without some stability of mind, it could be really challenging for them. So if an individual can train their mind, they can actually eliminate a lifetime of being relegated to medications, certain therapies, because it's very expensive to do these kinds of things. And not only that, but an individual might experience certain side effects, because as you're taking certain chemicals and introducing those into the body, there's going to be a whole host of side effects that an individual is experiencing. So an individual can get freedom from these medications through training the mind and getting it to a point where it's free of these pollutions. And as an individual eliminates their pollution of mind, they can experience peace and joy within the mind. An individual is going to know when it's the right time to decrease their medications or eliminate them based on their own gradual improvements to the condition of their mind. There's nobody that can tell an individual when or if they should actually do that. But as an individual learns and grows and develops and trains their mind, they will be able to see the stability of the mind improving beyond anything they've ever experienced before. Even before they were ever diagnosed, even before they ever were on medications, by the time they train their mind will be more stable than it's ever been in their entire life. And they will be able to observe that about their own mind. And they will figure out for themselves when or if is the right time to actually decrease their medications. But it would be important for them to build up the stability of their mind first through training of their mind. So there's a whole litany of things that people may have been diagnosed with, either you or people around you. And I can help you to be able to see how each one of these and the symptoms that one is experiencing can easily be traced to just pollutions of the mind. And there's certain training that the Buddha shared that is going to be able to help you eradicate those symptoms and the anguish and the challenges and struggles that one experiences. Because someone who's experiencing what's labeled as ADHD or ADD, the challenges that they're experiencing is real. The mental anguish that they're having in terms of difficulty concentrating and focusing in their day-to-day life, that's a real thing that they're experiencing that. But the cause of that is not actually true. That it's not because their brain is defective or that anything's wrong. It's just that their mind is craving mental stimulation. If you grew up during a time where phone apps were really popular, or social media and short videos were really popular, and video games, and you're constantly jumping from game to game to game and app to app to app to app like this, and an individual hasn't actually trained their mind to be focused and concentrated, well, by the time they're 4 years old, 6 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old, going to school, the idea of sitting in front of a teacher for an hour, this is very challenging for that person because they never actually had the experience of just sitting down and concentrating on something for an extended period of time. So their mind hasn't actually been trained to just be concentrated and focused. Because when I was growing up, ADHD and ADD, all these things, they didn't exist because we didn't have the same kind of mental stimulation that people are experiencing nowadays. But now when individuals are experiencing that in their life as a child, and then they go to school, they find it very challenging to concentrate. And if we're just introducing medical technology and chemicals, the individual's brain chemistry is being tweaked, but the mind itself isn't being trained. But if we train the mind, then we will see that an individual can perform with concentration and focus. Or if somebody is challenged with something like anorexia or bulimia or other eating disorders, this oftentimes comes from the mind craving a certain image of beauty. Maybe somebody has seen celebrities or magazines or pictures on the internet, and all of these things are being photoshopped, and an individual kind of conditions their mind and imprints in their mind that their body has to look like that too. And now the mind is craving permanence, not realizing that they live in an impermanent world, that not everyone's going to look like that celebrity. Not everybody's going to look like that fashion model. And truth be told, that fashion model doesn't even look like that because they photoshopped her image or his image. But if your mind is regularly viewing those kinds of things and you adopt the perception that, oh my goodness, in order for me to be beautiful, I have to look like that too. Now that craving for beauty, an individual resorts to drastic measures like anorexia or bulimia, what's being labeled as those things, where they might starve themselves or they might make themselves vomit in order to not take on those calories. So we could go through each one of these and we could talk about each one of them. This is actually a chart from Volume 1, Chapter 22, but I'll just show it to you here, and then you can ask me any questions you like here in a moment. But let me just finish with this one about suicidal thoughts, that oftentimes individuals have suicidal thoughts, like they feel like they want to kill themselves. And oftentimes what they're experiencing is these really painful thoughts within their own mind. They're experiencing these painful memories or painful thoughts or painful feelings. They're having all these painful things in the mind. And they think the way to stop that and get rid of that is to kill themselves. Well, if you ever talk to someone who's maybe contemplating suicide or killing themselves, they typically don't really want to kill themselves. What they really would like to do is they would like to end the painful feelings, that they're struggling with these painful feelings and they would like to get rid of them, but they just don't know how. They lack the wisdom of how to do that. And maybe even the people who are on the suicide hotline, or doctors and nurses and psychologists, they're in there tweaking brain chemistry and they don't understand how to solve the painful feelings. But the Buddha figured this out. The Buddha figured out how to eliminate painful feelings. But as long as somebody craves permanent happiness, they're longing and yearning for it, not realizing that the unenlightened mind is going to go up and down from time to time. If they really crave that permanent happiness now, they might actually have such painful feelings that they feel like the only thing to do is to kill themselves. And that's the way to solve the problem. But that's not going to solve the problem, because they're just going to come back into the world again and again and again and again, experiencing continuous birth. So suicidal thoughts, while they're very challenging and very difficult for an individual to deal with, what they're really looking for is they're really looking to end those painful feelings. But with a lack of wisdom of how to do that, you can feel stuck in a box, and the only way to get out of this box, they might think, is to kill themselves. But there is an escape. The escape is the Eightfold Path. That's what the Buddha taught. is understanding this Eightfold Path. And when you train your mind and you can gradually improve the way the mind's functioning, you'll see that the mind becomes more and more peaceful and more joyful. But the individual needs to decide to cultivate the wisdom. And because this wisdom isn't pervasive in the Western world, we see a lot of suicide all throughout the world where people are struggling with painful feelings and they think their only way out is to kill themselves. So there's help and there's ability to improve all of this if an individual can learn what's the real cause of these painful feelings, what's the real cause of this PTSD, what's the real cause of OCD and things like this. When we understand the real cause, we can actually apply the solution. So let me know what questions you guys have. You can put this into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, because this is everything that I had to share with you guys on this topic. If you read this chapter, you saw the things that I shared there in detail, and my talk here is just to kind of summarize the things that I shared in the chapter. But you guys can ask any and all questions that you like. If you put that into the comment section of Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, I'll be able to see that. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any and all questions that you like. So it looks like we have a question coming in, maybe from Robert, or maybe Michelle's with you today. So if you guys would like to go ahead, you're welcome.
Yeah, I think we have some questions, but I'll start with the first one that I've asked you this before, but I still have a question about, so I have a seizure disorder or epilepsy, and so I have to take a medication that's also used to treat bipolar disorder. And so I've always wondered, is this brain chemistry impact of having epilepsy, which may have also been tied to other practices like, substance abuse, is this something that's going to have a long-term impact because I'll probably need to take it for the rest of my life? And is this going to, impact ability to continue to grow at a certain point because I'm still taking this substance that impacts my brain and potentially the mind?
Yeah, if an individual has the ability to intellectually learn and bring in information, do something with that, and then implement it in their day-to-day life, there's no reason why they wouldn't be able to progress on the path to enlightenment. Whether any one particular medication would hinder somebody, we would have to look at the qualities of that medication and what it is and what the chemicals are. Because if there's a medication that's hindering the mind or pushing it down or kind of muting what you experience in terms of mindfulness, then that could potentially hinder you. But I don't think that's the case with this medication because we've talked about it before. And I don't think that you'll have any issues whatsoever because all of my interactions with you, you have the ability to learn intellectually, to reflect, and to practice. And I don't see any deficiency in terms of being able to cultivate mindfulness or awareness of mind, because that's what a medication could potentially do. Not all medications would do that, because there's going to be some other illnesses that are real true bodily illnesses that people are going to take medications for, and that they're going to need that in order to continue in their life. And that's showing loving kindness and compassion for this being. But you'd have to look at the medication, and I think we did that together, Robert. I can't remember 100%. But if it's hindering an individual's mindfulness and their awareness of their mind, like it causes heedlessness, this could be a challenge for them. But I don't think that's the case because you're not heedless whenever we've interacted with each other.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that makes sense. So even if there are cases where you're taking some medication, as long as it's not impacting your ability to cultivate mindfulness, it kind of just only is the difference of your mind versus somebody else's mind due to there is some difference in brain chemistry just based on who we are as, beings or in this physical form. But that all these beings can still cultivate mindfulness, and if they can do that, then they're still on this path. In my case, I just have to take this medication to keep me from having seizures, which is helpful.
Yeah, exactly. There is something that doctors have found in your brain that it needs the tweaking of brain chemistry so that the seizure doesn't happen. And you know that when you take this medication that you don't have those seizures, or at least you have less of them or less frequency. And that's very beneficial for you, but it still allows you to cultivate wisdom, to cultivate wholesome qualities of mind and eliminate unwholesome qualities. So there's not going to be any impact for you to be able to continue to cultivate your mind, eliminating unwholesome qualities and cultivate wholesome qualities. In fact, it's just the opposite. If you didn't take this medication, you would have regular seizures and they would probably just get worse. And that would hinder you from being able to have a stability of mind to actually then be able to learn and practice and develop the mind.
Okay. Always nice to reinforce that. I think Michelle had some questions, if that's okay, or you want to check other sources.
Oh, that's sure. Since we're talking with you guys, Michelle's welcome to ask any of her questions that she has.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, no, you're good. This class really resonates with me because I have ADHD and it used to be a lot worse. And as like the years progress and I've been focusing more and more on my mind and even more recently on, all of your teachings here, it's like drastically decreased. But my question here is, so while cultivating mindfulness has helped me immensely, like the science behind it does still show that like there's like mutations in receptors, mutations in the way that these chemicals are passed from cell to cell. Does that mean that it's more difficult for people like us? It's not impossible, but it makes it like there's maybe a greater barrier there. I just wanted to get your opinion on it.
Yeah, so while you've been diagnosed with ADHD, that's basically just a label for a collection of symptoms. And those symptoms are just coming from an untrained mind. And while there may be physical structures in the brain that are different and that people are tracking through things like MRI and CAT scans and things like that, when you start training the mind, there's going to be a positive effect to the change of your brain. So for me, for example, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and a whole bunch of other things. And I was taking medications. I couldn't even sleep without taking a handful of medications for many years. I've gotten rid of all of that stuff through training of the mind. And I used to walk around with a lot of pressure on my skull. And when you train your mind, you will notice that there's an effect to the brain and that the physical structures of the brain are changing. So while an individual who lacks concentration due to lack of training of the mind might present certain things in the brain in terms of the physical brain, when they start training their mind to have concentration, I suspect that all that stuff in the brain that someone is associating with what they're labeling as ADHD, that'll all change because your mind will actually be performing optimally where you'll have focus and concentration and clarity. So it's important not to adopt the identity that you have ADHD. It's important to understand that you might be lacking concentration or whatever else are the symptoms that you're experiencing because of what you're experiencing in your day-to-day life. But all of that can be remedied. This ADHD isn't permanent. And when you transform your mind and train your mind, you'll be able to see more and more of the qualities that are improving, that the mind's performing more and more optimally.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have anything else. Okay, I'm not seeing any other. Oh, there's Alberto. Hello, sir. What's your question?
Hi, everyone. So my question is how can someone who has mental illness to a severe degree, like suicidal thoughts or substance abuse, and how can someone receive the benefits of the teaching of the Buddha when they are not on the path? And if they are not going to receive, they are not going to welcome messages such as, for someone with OCD, I remember my dad had severe OCD, the least he wanted to hear is like, nothing is permanent. Okay. So, and someone with obsessive substance abuse or even suicidal thoughts, they may not be in a place to hear about the benefits of the teachings of the Buddha to their lives. So my specific questions is, when you have someone in your inner circle or circle, someone you care for, and you think that this can be helpful for them, so I struggle to find the right moment and how to address this. I mean, thinking about how to apply right speech.
Yeah, if somebody is disinterested in understanding these teachings and disinterested in doing any kind of investigation of the teachings, they're not going to be able to experience the benefit, because you can't force someone to be able to train their mind and be able to understand these teachings and get to enlightenment. So an individual is going to need to be open and understanding. I mean, there's even times where people will come to talk to me. It actually happened today where somebody came and talked to me, visiting my house, interested to have a conversation, but by and large, they weren't interested in learning anything whatsoever. So even taking the effort to find someone who shares the teachings of the Buddha, taking the effort to travel to their house and come in and sit down in their house, and they're still not interested in learning and understanding the teachings of the Buddha. And an individual like that, they're just not going to be able to learn. And the only thing that you can do is lovingly and with care and compassion, occasionally maybe drop a thing here or there. Like I've done this with my sister before, where she's really struggling with something, and I would say, the Buddha has some really good teachings that would help you in this situation. And I just stop right there. And if she says, oh yeah, really? What are they? And then I would help her. But oftentimes, and actually every single time I've ever done these kinds of things, she never goes to the next step. Where other people have, like my grandmother has done that, and other people, when I share things like that, they have to be willing to take the step forward. Because in order to get to enlightenment and improve the mind, there's like 1,000,001 decisions that somebody needs to make. And if they're not willing to make the very first decision, to just ask a question or sit down and look at a book or sit down and look at a short video or something like that, if they're not willing to take that very first step, then they're not going to take the other 1,000,000 steps that they need to be able to take. So all you can do is just lovingly mention something to them every once in a while. And I think I did this with my sister maybe 2 or 3 times, and then I just didn't say anything anymore. And a good probably 2 or 3 years went by that I never said anything to her about the teachings. And then just one day out of the blue, she sent me a message and she said, hey, David, I would like to let you know that I was hanging out with my coworkers the other day, and they were talking about Buddhism and asking me all kinds of questions. And based on me reading your post and the things that I've seen that you write about, I was able to answer their questions, and it felt really nice. And in my mind, I was like, she's reading my post? I didn't even have any idea that she was reading my post. So you never know what an individual's doing in the background. So all you can do is just offer loving support. But eventually you're going to have to pull back and not have a craving to help this person. Of course, you stand ready to help them if they're ever interested in that help. But if you have a longing, yearning, and a wanting and an expectation, it'll just cause discontentedness in your own mind, because they're just not interested to learn on the path.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but we can't force people. And even if we could, I wouldn't even be interested in doing it.
Yeah. So last year, a friend of ours, it's not the first depression episode she had in her life, but last year, right 1 year ago, she went through major depression, even suicidal thoughts, escaping. Family didn't even know where she was. And before that, at some point, she asked me about, Buddhism, and she knew I was traveling to Thailand, taking classes with you. And I shared a copy of your book. So, this is working many aspects of my life, and accepted the book. And they never read it. and then she got much better. Better. Now she's performing functionally, work-wise, family-wise. And then now she's more interested in knowing about it. But traditional psychiatry approaches worked, I think, in the case that at least she calmed down. She went through therapy. Of course, she was medicated. But now she's done with medication and everything, but she's in a better position now to herself make the decision to want to learn.
Yeah, that's where the modern psychology is really helpful. Because now that we've got large populations of people in the world that don't understand the teachings of the Buddha, they're going to get into a lot of troubles and a lot of difficulties within their own mind, like suicidal thoughts or psychosis. I had psychosis multiple times where I was in 6-point restraints at different times in the hospital, even in straitjackets and stuff when I was going through college before I knew these teachings. So modern psychology is absolutely beneficial. That's not, what I'm talking about in this discussion. It's saying that, hey, there's this solution that goes beyond psychology, because in an acute situation where somebody's in psychosis, there's no amount of meditation and Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path. It's going to help them, because if you've ever been in psychosis or know somebody that has been, there's nothing that the mind's taking in at that point. I mean, it's like almost gone. So once somebody gets stable on medications and some level of therapy and some ability to bring in information and content, that's when they can start learning. So that's where modern psychology is really benefiting us in society, is that it's there in those acute situations where in a place like Thailand, they have that kind of treatment. They have psychological hospitals, but they're very rarely used because people don't get into those difficulties very much because they've been learning these teachings within their household. But in a place like the USA and other places where we haven't learned these teachings, there's a lot of those kinds of things happening, like suicidal thoughts and schizophrenia and psychosis. So there's definitely a benefit and a need for these kinds of treatments. And then once somebody gets up to that level of stability, then it's time, if they're open, to be able to learn and grow and develop with something like the teachings of the Buddha. Okay, let me see if we have anything coming in anywhere. I don't see anything. So what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to end class by thanking all of you guys for joining. I appreciate your interest to learn and practice these teachings. It's always nice to share the teachings with you guys. If you would like to read this chapter, you're going to get a whole lot more insight of things that I share there and the way I really break it down for you. So feel free to read that by getting access to it from our website. You can take it and go print it. It's free for you to do those things. You can get it at our temple by just reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can order it on Amazon if you have access to Amazon. Next week, I'm going to be in chapter 23, which is titled Symbolism of the Teachings, Reminders Through Imagery. This is where you're going to be able to learn all the different images and symbols that are used in temple construction and artwork and architecture that remind you of the teachings of the Buddha. Because now that you've actually been learning throughout the course of this program, you can actually now learn about the symbolism and the artwork and the architecture in a way that will kind of bring these things to life for you. So instead of just visiting a temple or seeing an artwork and saying, oh, that's pretty, you'll actually understand what the real symbolism is of these things. And then you can feel comfortable and enjoy visiting temples or looking at artwork and things of this nature. Tomorrow, I'm going to be starting a class or a course Monday through Friday. I'm going to be starting at 9 a.m. and finishing up at 3 p.m., which is called Harmony in Relationships. This is a course that's going to help you to develop harmonious relationships with all the people around you. Because as long as your mind isn't trained, you'll have difficulties in certain relationships around you. But you can get to a point where all your relationships are harmonious. It just takes the mind to cultivate the wisdom of how to do that, and then actually to train in order to be able to be trained, to be able to cultivate the wisdom and cultivate the qualities of mind that's going to lead to improved relationships and harmonious relationships. So you can attend that live, because I live stream it, or in Zoom, or you can watch the recordings if you like. So thank you all again for joining, and perhaps I'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Be well and take care. Sawadee-ka.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.